Hi, I'm Pierre. I'm the market lead for the tax and accounting division at Thomson Reuters for the Asia and emerging market region. And I'm very pleased to be joined today by...
Hi Pierre, I'm Shiraz, the head of tax at Tamimi.
So, Shiraz, thank you so much for being with us today. So, VAT has been introduced in the UAE now for over 12 months. So, from a legal framework point of view, what have you seen happening so far in the market?
The developments have actually fallen into 4 different areas. So first of all, the VAT law and regulations were issued in 2017, but they left a number of important decisions to the cabinet. So in 2018, we saw various decisions being published by the cabinet. So there was a decision on designated zones. There was also a cabinet decision on a list of charities which are entitled to recover input VAT. And there was also a cabinet decision on medicine and medical equipment. And under the VAT legislation, the Federal Tax Authority also has the power to issue certain decisions. And they've issued a few decisions as well, including a decision on tax invoices.
Right.
And in addition to these decisions, cabinet decisions and decisions of the Federal Tax Authority, the Federal Tax Authority have also provided guidance to businesses through the form of publication of various guides. So there's been some general guides, for example, on VAT registration, a taxpayer guide, and there's also some special guides on certain industry sectors, financial services, real estate and insurance, just to mention a few. And finally, the tax authority also provides clarification to taxpayers. The taxpayers, wherever there's an area of uncertainty and they're not able to interpret an area of the law, they could request the Federal Tax Authority to provide a clarification. And a number of taxpayers have now done that. And the Federal Tax Authority also have the ability, if the clarification is of public interest, to publish it. And they've published more than 10 clarifications so far in 2000.
For the wider market.
Absolutely.
So a lot has happened so far in 12 months.
Yes.
So from a pure VAT compliance point of view, what approach have you seen taxpayers take here so far, and maybe some of the mistakes that they've done as well?
I think it's fair to say some of the larger businesses have taken a more proactive approach to VAT compliance. So these larger businesses are proactively assessing the positions they've taken in the VAT returns, which is the right thing to do, because when the law was first issued, it was a new law, there was lots of uncertainty, and in the light of all these guides published by the Federal Tax Authority, positions are constantly being revised. So you have to keep abreast of these developments and review your positions in the light of these developments. On the other hand, some other businesses, they're taking a more laid-back approach. So they're effectively waiting for an audit to happen and identify to them that there's actually an error before they take any remedial action. In terms of some of the errors that businesses are making, they fall into various categories. So even before the submission of a VAT return, some businesses are not actually required to register, and they can't even register on a voluntary basis. However, somehow they've managed to register.
Okay.
In addition to that, there's other businesses that are required to register but still haven't registered. And all the other errors are quite basic. So one of the errors is not accounting for VAT under the reverse charge mechanism, and still issuing invoices which are non-tax compliant.
Yeah. So, in light of that, what would you say the FTA approach has been so far?
So far, the FTA, being a very new tax authority, you have to remember they were only established by legislation in 2016, and then they started recruiting staff in 2017. And at the moment, as it stands, they still have very limited resources. Therefore, they haven't had the capability to undertake detailed audits. And most of their audits have so far been limited to the issue of VAT refunds. But in the future, I expect this to change.
To become more and more active in that area, isn't it?
Absolutely. As their resources increase, you could expect more activity in the audit area.
So, in light of what we just talked about, if I was someone watching this video today and I'm not sure about my VAT position, what would you recommend I do?
I think the first thing to bear in mind is that the penalties for errors can be quite high. And in the UAE, the penalties for errors are up to 300% of the amount of tax. So those penalties are quite high. However, luckily for businesses, there is a mechanism under which they can make a voluntary disclosure. And the key to that mechanism is that the earlier you make the voluntary disclosure, the lower the penalty. So in terms of businesses, there'll be ultimately someone responsible at the organization for dealing with the VAT compliance. And they'll have the responsibility to make sure the organization is compliant with all VAT obligations. And this could be the legal function, it could be the finance function, or there could be a specialized tax function. But whichever function is responsible, and ultimately whichever person is responsible, we need to make sure that they proactively manage the risk by identifying the issue and identifying the correct VAT position.
And so, what role do you see technology play into that?
Technology plays a very important role. I think most organizations would have already reviewed their IT capability to produce automated VAT reporting, but to the extent that they haven't done that, they should revisit that definitely. Because if your technology is not in order, it's likely to result in more errors.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we've been seeing as well, where people have not enough detail into the data at a core system level, and then them trying to produce a VAT return becomes a very manual task, which I guess put them at a risk as well of being non-compliant at the end of the day, which no one wants, right? So Shiraz, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Pierre.
And thank you all for watching, and see you next time.